And we're joined in studio by our Batya Levinthal. But first, let's speak with Ambassador Ben Bourgel. He's the Israeli ambassador to Chad, as well as to the African nations of Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and Cape Verde. And he joins us this evening from here in Israel. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for joining us. Quite an array of countries there you're working with. Let's talk about Chad, its importance to Israel, and the value, of course, Israel has for Chad.
Thank you very much for having me, and good evening to everyone. So, yeah, I mean, today is a very important day for Israel and for Chad, but also a very strong signal that is sent not only to Chad, but also to all the nations that are still considering and bonding the possibility to have relation with Israel. Coming to the relation with Chad, so I would say that they stem for a convergence of interest, but also to a convergence of principle to many extents. Since the resumption of the relation in 2019, led by Prime Minister Netanyahu and the late Marshal Idris Deby, the relations have been focusing mainly on issues of common interest. And from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs point of view, we've been working very hard to be relevant and to find issues that are important and challenges that are important to both sides, being it climate change, dealing with climate change challenges, health, education, training, and that has been the core and maybe the driver of this relationship. I had the opportunity last Monday to be in N'Djamena, the capital of Chad, to participate to the ceremony of completion of a training of 50 doctors of Chad that have been trained to operate an ICU unit that has been offered by Mashav, our international cooperation agency in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to the Hôpital Central de N'Djamena, the main hospital in N'Djamena. And that's something that maybe encapsulates the idea that we want to be relevant where our friends need us.
Right. Batya, the ambassador, is saying an important message maybe for Africa, maybe for some other countries that may want to also think about upgrading relations with Israel?
As I mentioned in my report, Benjamin Netanyahu has really used the relations that Israel has formed with Chad as a catalyst for spearheading, if you will, a lot of the ties that are now been formed or have now been formed with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco. And this really has been his prime task and something that we've seen that he's brought up a few times. While the relations with Chad and the opening of the embassy tomorrow being Thursday are an achievement in their own right, one has to remember that Israel actually has for many years had very good relations with the African continent. It's now since 2019, as the ambassador mentioned, when Chad and Israel signed or re-established their relations, that made it number 41 out of the 45 sub-Saharan African countries, not only providing medical assistance and also having brilliant economic and trade ties with these countries, but also now entering into the sphere of security. And we saw that today when the Mossad chief, David Batya, actually met and greeted the Chadian president on his arrival. And so very much this could be seen as a catalyst for other nations, but not predominantly in Africa, more so the Middle East and the Gulf nations, which is where Netanyahu and his government are pushing and heading for.
Right, and Mr. Ambassador, good point there. Let's remember Chad is a Muslim-majority nation, and it sits in a kind of problematic neighborhood bordering Libya, some other countries where Islamist forces are at play. There's a limit of what I'm sure you could talk about security ties, but surely there is a strategic importance for Israel having this relationship with Chad.
Absolutely. And as you have mentioned, not only the resumption of the relation between the country, but the opening, the materialization of this resumption with the opening of an embassy is a very important benchmark. It sends a very important signal, and it also shows to all the neighboring countries that it is possible and that it can be mutually beneficial for all the parties involved. And I think that this is the main message also that has been conveyed, that friends stand with friends, and that could be a catalyst also for widening the relation to all their extents, and as you mentioned, also in the sphere of economic ties.
Right. Now, I'm sure there are certain economic constraints, but Chad opening an embassy tomorrow, it's going to be in the Tel Aviv area. Will Israel be opening an embassy in Chad, you maybe lighten your load or allow you to concentrate a bit in the near future?
I think today and tomorrow we're celebrating the opening of the embassy in Tel Aviv, and let's see what the future will bring. But it's sure that it will be in the sense of the deepening and the widening of our relations with Chad.
And Frank, let's look ahead for Africa. More African nations, perhaps most are our ties, but are there other? May we have some other announcements, even among the few that are left in the near future?
We're convinced that the presence of President David today and the high-level meetings that he held with Prime Minister Netanyahu, with President Herzog, with the Minister of Foreign Affairs Eli Cohen, and all the other stakeholders that he has been meeting, will necessarily be conducive to creating the conditions for more and more enlargement of our relation with the countries who do not have yet relationship with us. That's for sure.
All right, I'm just going to note what a remarkable turnaround from the situation in Africa, of course, following the 67 and 73 war, when almost so much of the sub-Saharan nations broke off relations with Israel. What a remarkable turnaround it's been over the last few years. And you're part of it, Ambassador Ben Bourgel. Thank you for joining us on I-24 News. And Batya Levinthal, also, thank you for being with us this evening.